Hey guys, and welcome to Studio Sessions from Giving Works Studio. I'm Charles Cox here with Kevin Mangini, and we have a very special guest with us today from all the way across the Atlantic, Sindre Østgård, coming to us live from Oslo, Norway. Well, it's not live when you guys are watching this, but he's live with us. So welcome, Sindre.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Welcome, Sindre.
Thanks so much for joining us today. And I'll, if you don't mind, I'll just sing your praises for a bit because I know you're a very humble man who doesn't like to talk about himself. But Sindre is a managing partner at We Are Human. And through that and those connections there, he was one of the people behind Kahoot, where he helped them scale adoption. I believe you said to 97% of the S&P 500 companies. Is that right, Sindre?
That's right. And about 50% of American school children. So it's a billion player platform.
Wow. Yeah. And so for those who don't know Kahoot is great at making the boring but important stuff fun and engaging, a lot of gamification. So how kids often use it in schools is a teacher will put some sort of quiz up on the board and then they're using their phones or devices to answer questions and making learning fun. And obviously that has a direct connection to the corporate environment as well when it comes to corporate learning, coming up with a very sort of cool and different approach to making that kind of stuff fun. And Sindre, I believe you said that Kahoot, at least during your time there, never spent a single dollar in marketing. Is that right?
Yeah, that's actually correct. And I think the reason for that is that my partners and the co-founders of Kahoot, they went really deep on the behavioral patterns to look at how can we recognize when learning becomes something that is fun and shared. And I think their kind of symbol for that was to look at, that kid in the back of the classroom who's not maybe paying attention, or he might be struggling to be part of the format of learning.
Yeah, that was me.
Kind of yeah, right. So they were looking at like how to unlock that. And when they saw that behavior, they knew that they had something that connected the teacher, the people in the room, and that made learning awesome, which was kind of the motto. And when you have such a pattern, you have kind of something that will move because of the joy and the value that it creates. So it became kind of like a socially growing thing. And then millions to doubling in millions, literally exponential growth of users into the billion players yearly that it is now. So marketing wasn't needed because it was literally people telling other people, you should try this. And then that's the way it came into business as well. So people will do complicated job stuff in the same fun way as they did in the classroom. And that's just was the scaling X factor.
That's really amazing to hear. I mean, we've seen a lot of that too with the work we've done with universities for fundraising. Is the more we can make it feel like a fun game and less like a, as much as you want to believe that the message of it's important to give back and it's important, there is that rational argument and that's an important part of it too. But when you can make it fun, especially for a younger audience, I think that really resonates with them.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to how they've been growing up. I mean, the video games and the just the things at their fingertips that make them very tactile. I certainly saw it with my young child, how much going to museums that were to play and touch and feel. And, so all of these things kind of, when you add the gamification into it, it spurs a different part of the brain for these kids, but it also is a familiar one because, that is their playtime, unfortunately, too, at times. But it really is the mindset of, okay, I want to conquer this. I want to learn this so I understand it.
Yeah. And I guess to nerd out a bit for this for a second, I think my partners, the co-founders, what I think they did was literally see a lot of different pieces fitting together, including available technology. They knew that there was already a phone or like an iPad or something in that room. The internet existed, right? There was a classroom and the intention was learning, but maybe the intention wasn't working really well because most of the people in the room weren't learning much. So they kind of figured out how to put these things together and make that pattern work and unlocking. And I guess then it doesn't matter if you're a 12-year-old kid or if you're a 38-year-old guy at work trying to figure out some privacy boring tutorial that you're trying. It's kind of the same thing. So I think that is kind of the beauty of the design and how they made that work.
That's brilliant. I didn't mean to gloss over We Are Human. Do you mind talking to us a little bit about what you do with We Are Human?
Yeah, sure. So We Are Human is like a venture studio, venture builder. Obviously, we're fundamentally founders that like to build stuff, solutions for, problems that needs fixing in the world. And we've done that several times, sometimes not as successful as Kahoot. That was like one of very few impact unicorns, if you will, that like out of the Nordics, and it went through an IPO in 2021, and I was there on the board through that period. And so it's a lot of fun in learning that. But our DNA is building companies and also help building investment platforms from a deeply human-centric, values-based and aligned point of view. We want to build stuff that is good for the future generations, for the planet, for society, and build businesses that are good for people as well. So that's our motto, and we do that in multiple forms. I'm happy to talk more about that.
Fantastic. And you're managing partner there, but you're also on the board of stewards for 2050.do out of Paris. And obviously there's a lot of crossover in terms of the mission of both We Are Human and 2050.
That's true. We met 2050 through an investment, actually. Because as we had some resources we wanted to invest, we started looking for who are those crazy founders out there solving the most amazing things. So we found a company out of Finland, Sweden, that were storing massive amounts of carbon in materials that we need, like cement. So you can store carbon and use it for a usable material, and the founders were amazing. So through that investment, we met 2050, which is probably the most, I would say, sophisticated, forward, like future-looking investment platform we met out there, and we've seen a lot, led by a very visionary woman named Marie Eklund. And I think the difference with their approach than most others is that when we invest, I think there's we try to make it glorious and say we're predicting the future, but we're literally not. We're shaping the future, because money is energy, and where we invest that money, the future will go. So the problem with, I'm not going to bore you with
that's
financial
market. I don't know if that's on a poster somewhere. But
it's found this to be true. And the problem is when investing becomes something people are looking backwards at past data, and then they're using money to think they're predicting the future, but they're just reproducing faults from the past. So what 2050 did was to say, we have to start with the future we really want to live in. And that's the brand name is 2050, because the year 2050 is far enough to be very, very bold and ambitious about what we need to do for the world, but also close enough to care, because we're probably living there, and at least our children are. So it matters. So she articulated her kind of holistic vision, what that looks like. And it is a place and a state where we all live and produce sustainably. We're able to eat enough and eat healthfully. We take care of body and our minds. We empower learning and creativity, and we have trust at the heart of society and the economy. And even, education system is obviously super, super key piece of that. And if you start bringing that back to investment thesis, we can deploy capital towards that kind of future. And that is really meaningful. So we're working with them on more technology and methodology, like how do we do that well and build companies that literally are triple performing and both financially, socially, and ecologically sustainable. So super inspiring work.
And it's admittedly somewhat unexpected to hear of a VC fund or organization really putting that idea of investing in a sustainable future at the forefront, right? That it's not like a lot of them put it, it's greenwashing that they add on. Oh yeah, and by the way, but to actually have that be the main focus isn't that still somewhat unusual?
It is, and right now you would know that because of current conditions in political and geopolitical, all these positive, more sustainably oriented finance kind of movements are stalling a lot because of the politics going on. The problem with it is, if you think about, like, one thing is the good effect of investing and thinking that, but the other bigger problem is that those who have a linear, purely growth at all cost, and they don't care about any of these other impacts, they're carrying a huge risk. So people sitting on portfolios with those kind of assets, they might be thriving in this interregnum that we're in right now, But after that, at some point, those assets will be very, very risky. So
Right.
it's, for me, it's risk management, and it's a way to be much more future proof about where you place your money long term, and what's actually going to be a good investment even. So
yeah,
I think
I'll put this in a different term, Sindre. Here in the U.S., knowing what's happening with the oceans in general, and I'm still seeing these big houses being built right on the Jersey Shore, right on the water, and you're going, this is you're on the clock. There's it's an interesting investment at that time when you think what research is telling you that you're not going to be underwater if things continue on this path. So definitely hard for people to look at long range projects. There's so much short term gratification needs that people are looking for.
Yeah. And if you don't mind me segue from what your great point is, like, if you take what I just said and bring that into the ocean investing space, right now, as we stand, and this is like deeply validated science data and research from WWF and other institutions. Right now, there is $8.3 trillion value at risk in the next 12 years due to ocean degradation. And it's affecting 66% of publicly listed companies. So 10,000s of publicly listed companies, like assets that pension funds are investing in, are at risk because they're underestimating the effects of ocean degradation. So that's a purely like monetizable asset that you can look at and look at the risk. Our approach is then investing in the kind of a more regenerative alpha to kind of mitigate that risk, and also maybe can we even create regenerative value on top of that. That's kind of taking the 2050 thesis into ocean investing and looking at what is the future state of the ocean that will keep feeding us, keeping our houses and our life safe. It's a huge, biggest asset we have to keep maintain life on the planet, and we will also make money by sustaining that asset in a good way.
Yeah, I just wonder how transparent do you think most of these large companies are to even understanding the risk to their own investments?
I'll be blunt and say, I don't think they know. So I don't think they're lying about it, but they're not looking at it in the right way. We can tell now because we're
their heads in the sand, though, in many cases.
But it's kind of like if all your muscle memory and you've grown up in finance and you have very, very one linear way of viewing value and the world, you're going to make this mistake. What we do see is the most savvy pioneers and the leaders of industries, they're showing up now in a big way, and even trying to talk to us guys who are much earlier stage and saying, we want to be a part of looking at and investing with you because that's going to tell us where our industry is going. And we are able to look at those value chain transformations that are needed. And if we don't do them, we're either going to lose like our leader position in the market, or actually our business as a whole might collapse. So it's really, really important to us. So we see those smart outliers, but it's like as a whole, I think is wildly underestimated risk in a lot of portfolios that right now look golden, which are not.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we pivot for a bit? I just would love to talk about specifically with the ocean, when it comes to education, because I've been very enamored with a very small scale, but I think very impactful effort with EntrepreneurshipOne that you've been part of with getting kids out of the city and out on the water as a way to sort of connect them to the ocean. And because to me, there's a great idea in that, when you start, with that education aspect with the young, a younger generation, by the time they're the adults who are making these decisions, that won't be such a tough argument to convince them of the importance of the ocean. So if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about that project.
Yeah, I'd love to. And so again, back to we are human. I think we allow ourselves to be thinking really big, obviously, and because we've been part of stuff like Kahoot, which touches billions of people. I think we're allowed to, we can be a part of bigger changes if we do things right. On the other side of that, we realize sometimes things has to be very concrete and very, very small, because you have to be in both and this global level, but also very practical level. So at some point we thought, okay, we've done Kahoot, we know how to make learning awesome. What if we think about the ocean as the world's largest classroom? And that was doubly interesting for us. One is, at least in our part of the world, the ocean is it's only on the curriculum very late in expert, if you're going into deep specific subjects, you will study a lot of ocean stuff, but most of it is completely out of the spectrum. And every math example is about a car or a train or something on land. Like, it's literally not really there. And most people, even kids, specifically, aren't really exposed more than maybe they're swimming and bathing, but there's not like a deeper connection. So we thought, how can we make that connection? But to do that, we needed to be very small. And so we had two key assets. One, we had this small rock in the middle of the kind of the Skagerrak Ocean, literally from Norway facing Denmark. So it's pretty rough. And it's not even an island, it's a rock with a steering house of an old whale ship bolted on. So it's a pretty, peculiar place with a long history. And then we had a partnership with a tall ship, which is probably the latest tall ship built in the world, called Christian Radich, which had a windjammer program where they took kids that were about to, fall out of school, having psychological issues or, troubles in their life that kind of were hindering them to be part of the regular, societal path. They were part of something called the Windjammer program, where they would go on a sail journey, master the work and master the sailing, and build kind of confidence and skills and attitude with, amazing results. And then we realized, what if we take them, we kind of think about them as young entrepreneurs and aquanauts. So we went through a program with them and then kind of to make them comfortable and curious about what is the ocean. And then we sailed this tall ship from Oslo and through the night and all the way down southeast, where the island lies. And then we had like a full day of ocean exploration with these kids on the island, anything from very simple, like getting in. Some of these kids couldn't swim, right? They probably haven't been much at the ocean at all. Tasting it, picking live oyster off the rock and actually tasting the ocean. We had underwater drones. We had like different ways of exploring. We had sailing, learning the simple art of sailing. So it was like this small rock with just 50 children from a tall ship being aquanauts for a day. And we could kind of see how they were just, individually and as a collective awakening to that. And us grown-ups, blown away by what we can do in a small scale like that. So I'll stop there because I guess that was my little story about.
I think it all ties into what we've been talking about when it comes to the tactile and touching and games. And that experience is teaching through experience, and for kids that is more long lasting. It requires, well, frankly, funding and support and an infrastructure and all of that, which is part of where we try to, we're trying to take our efforts is to help people with great causes. But, that kind of program, as you hear it, you're like, yes, that's how I would imagine a kid would learn and care and grow an interest to continue their learning. Because what you're trying to do is spark something. You're not like going to go home after a weekend and you've learned everything you can about the ocean, but if you make it in this environment where there's fun and learning together and it's experiential, it's really, really how kids react to things.
Yeah.
Experiential education it creates those connections, and it makes that spark, right? It makes that spark that fuels later passion and interest. And that's something that's so tough to get in the classroom, especially for kids who are neurodivergent or have other learning issues in a classroom setting. To be fair, I think most kids have a lot of learning issues in a classroom setting because they get bored. They like the way their attention span now, thanks to social media and all these other inputs, their attention span is so dampened down that it's tough for them to focus when a teacher's just at the front of a classroom talking to them. So being able to get them out and do something like this is amazing for fueling their interests.
Yeah, these are especially vulnerable kids, right? These are kids that are afraid of getting out of bed in the morning. So seeing that how fast that moves when you connect, it's very inspiring. And then to my former point about Kahoot, we could see that what we did the week after, we had a global ocean conference where we broadcasted live from the same place and kind of were doing some of the same things just on digital platforms and using Kahoot. And we brought, big, CEOs out there that would be standing stiff and looking at the ocean until it was like, you actually have to get in. And you kind of get the same reaction. Learning becomes fun again. And, because we are learning all our lives, so we should. So it's something very deeply human, I think, in this, which we love to see unlocked.
So what was that like, getting the CEOs out of their three-piece suits and into a wetsuit and into the ocean?
Yeah, it takes more convincing than even these kids that, that should think that hurdles was bigger, but we get them there. And it's
a three-piece wetsuit, but it's there.
Yeah. With a small thing. We're all human, most of us, and we all have great joy by being connected to nature in some shape or form. And just, the ocean happens to be the element we are closest to.
What surprised you the most about that experience?
I guess I never stop getting amazed what happens if you're able to kind of reframe a context. Because, if you have a group in a classic meeting room or a classic classroom, and the patterns are very repeatable. We see it again and again. It's the same kind of pattern. And then you take the same group and you reframe the context. For example, put them on a rock or a tall ship. And I'll tell you another tall ship story if you like in a minute with other people. But then suddenly all these new patterns, start emerging, and new dynamics, learning, new discussions, new solutions. And we know this now, that it's reprogramming our neuro pathways, so we are able to think a little bit differently, and that's what creativity is. That's what learning is. That's what solution or problem solving is. So I think that is never stopping to amaze me, how well that works, and why aren't we doing it all the time? Why isn't learning happening in surprising places, for example? I'll take another example.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to go along on my tall ships, but we had the great joy of sailing another tall ship. Norway has 3, so I now sailed 2 out of 3 from San Francisco to San Diego a few weeks ago, actually, with top 100 like ocean investors, pioneers, entrepreneurs, like very high diversity, but mostly from later 20s to 70s, 80s. And the same thing happens. Get these people on a deck. Some of them will be sick immediately. It's painful, it's hard. You start having workshops while sailing the coast of California, and you're in nature. There's whales there. Like, all this comes together, and it's a life-changing experience for the 100. Yeah. So these things I believe in, taking us nearer to the element and learn and work there.
See, I just wanted to ask about how. I mean, it's amazing to hear about this, and immediately I get jealous, thinking, God, I wish I was on that trip. I wish I could, see that. How do you scale something like that? Like, obviously with Kahoot, you're putting it in digital, but we know that, it's not the same, right? How do you help a broader audience get that same sort of experiential effect without, when the reality is you can only bring so many people on that island. You can only put so many people on a tall ship at once.
Yeah. Actually, that was a topic on the deck of the tall ship. How do we scale this? And it's a tough one. I do think there's some basic methodologies that we have and that we open source that I think are applicable. It won't do that life-changing thing, but it helps you on the path to kind of figuring out, how do I do what I want to do in the long term and make sure that we kind of have a fully aligned way of doing it. And then I think having experiences like this happening many places in asynchronous same time is important. So from I'm deep into the future of the planet, and how do we solve this thing that we're up against. And I think it's a bi-regional systemic gathering of good people being a little bit outside the format of the room, if you use that metaphor, that are thinking about solutions that work and that they can deploy and are near them. And I see that happening a lot. And if a sail ship is involved, great. But mostly always nature is involved. So, but I think stuff like that do scale, but it becomes like a multi-local scale. And our job maybe is to create some blueprints and some methodologies that help that happen faster, more places at the same time. And then we can turn this thing around.
The story of that trip is just fascinating to me as well. And I'm just curious, did those people tell their stories in any way? Because I would think the best echo out of that is when these very senior executives share what they got out of it, because they are also obviously thought leaders to a lot of other people.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's a great point. And yes, they do. And that's also a way to scale it. I think it only comes to life through stories. And stories is what changes things, right? Like I've been talking about the science of what I do up and down and up and down, and no one's going to move anything. But if I tell a story that matters, it's going to do it. So I think that's spot on, and that's probably a part of the solution, that we're better at getting those changing stories, the positive, hopeful solution stories out there.
I think I went on the boat with one thought of what this was going to be, and I got off the boat, and this is what I found out. That transformation, which you kind of speeded through, for most people, those experiences don't collide so quickly in a few-day trip. But that's powerful to go on with one expectation.
Yeah. And this troll ship is on its second around the world, called the One Ocean Expedition. So there are people right now on that ship having similar experiences. I think they're in Panama right now or something. So it happens sequentially, and I think the ship is just going to go back to Bergen in Norway and reboot and then do it again. And it's kind of like this continuous story of building a larger collective that realizes what we need to do for this particular.
I selfishly, I would want to create a reality series out of it, but on a level of the fact that whatever, you don't want to make it about everybody. You need to tell us your story, but I do think in that there's so much appreciation for nature that if there's a focused effort to telling that story during those trips with those people who are willing to talk about their transformation, I do think. I mean, that is what Charles and I hear from just a general education standpoint. We know the power of education, and we know the power of storytelling. Yeah. And then it's how do you get people involved in a way that makes a difference. The work you're doing, those kinds of events are fabulous, and I think they're also really touch points for storytelling.
And when I think of the importance of scaling and how that can be done, I mean, I was immediately also thinking of the Fjordarium, the sort of reverse aquarium in Oslo, which is to me a brilliant way to sort of take a lot of these ideas, and by putting them where land meets the ocean in a more accessible spot and allowing the public in, that allows them to you get a much larger scale in terms of who can experience it. So do you mind, because I know nobody else watching this knows what the hell the Fjordarium is, so if you don't mind telling us a little bit about that and what that entails.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So we continue in this ocean as a classroom, right? And then some really large real estate developers came to us and say, we hear that you're passionate about the ocean, and we are too, and we have a lot of resources. What if we build an amazing aquarium? And we were like, in Norway. And we were like, okay. So we're like in the 2020s, we're going to build another box. We're going to fly and fish from all around the world, and we'll have people look into that. It's not ethical. It's just, and it's a very limited learning experience. So we're like, no, what if we think very differently about this? So what we did was we were looking at the place, and it's actually in the Oslo Fjord, and Oslo Fjord is, this long, thin fjord leading all the way into Oslo, where the Vikings used to come, and that's why it became a place because the trade happened there. But it's like this long fjord that's been a very vibrant ecosystems for centuries of fish and all kinds of marine life. But it's now dying. So our assumption was, what if we create an inverted aquarium where we might make the dying Oslo Fjord and its regeneration, the learning experience. And that's what we built for. So we work with architects and scientists and technologists and material science people to look at how can we then build a structure into the fjord that enables us to observe what we can do to regenerate the life and make that the learning experience in a reference to kind of a projection of what does it look like if we in 2050, same vision, actually are able to regenerate life in the ocean. What does that look like? And what does it look like if we continue on the trajectory we're on, and using all kinds of technologies to make that a great experience. So and the entire thesis was to be able to invite in school classes, families, in business groups from the entire both region and also internationally into this experience. So it was a really fun thing to develop. You can imagine, quite expensive to build. So it still is not built, but the entire plans are there. And we're actually currently discussing with a group which has like 250 museums. There are a network of museums around the world that are super drawn to it. And we just want to open source whatever we've done, if that can be put to work somewhere else. So it might just be a fjordarium near you, Charles, at some point, because we think it's a way to, again, make people engage and connect and learn together cross-disciplinary about the ocean in the element.
Yeah, if you want to talk about dead aquatic environments, I think near me, the Passaic River in Newark would be a beautiful place to do that concept. But it is interesting because I think that when you talk about the fjord, I think from I've done a lot of travel writing and traveling, and Oslo Fjord is often hailed as at least from a tourist aspect on land, it's hailed as already regenerative. Like, this was something that was an industrial wasteland, and now it's this beautiful tourist destination with these, this amazing award-winning, opera house that goes down into the ocean that looks like an iceberg, and these hotels and restaurants. But when you go under the surface, you're saying that the, thanks to climate change and whatnot, that the reality is a little bit different, right?
Yeah, and more than climate change is actually, the result of human activity. It's like a funnel of half of Norway, all our waste, all the stuff from food industries and the growing military industry now shipping weapons to Ukraine is pouring into that fjord. And we blew up a lane in the middle so the cruise ships could go faster directly as a part of a social economic, point that will make more money out of that. That nearly killed it. But the beauty of ocean and life itself is it comes back so quickly. So actually it was just banned. So right now, all fishing, all lobster, nothing, you're not allowed to catch life or hurt life in the fjord for a decade. And it will come back. I've even seen underwater videos, which was a part of our concept, that we be like in this fjordarium and kind of feel that we're sensing and seeing the entire fjord live. And so a lot of those cameras exist, and you can see already that there is regrowth happening, new species coming back. They're small, it's going to come back. And if we do that with the oceans at scale, and if we save our high seas and make sure that they're not overfished, and if we do a little bit more of the right things, it will be coming back in a huge way. That's inspiring.
Yeah. Sorry, the you mentioned cameras, and I can't stop being a marketer, but the reality is it's also gram-worthy. You created a site where people are going to an educational spot, that you've created a beautiful visual that, as we know, feeds into the behavior of just about everybody in the world, which is, look at me, here I am in front of something beautiful. And then it's a gateway to learning about something that has a positive end goal. But the fact that it's gram-worthy starts to make it more pop culture awareness, because it's not just a museum. It's also you start to make it part of your identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to land the point, if we can create a greater connection, people will care, and what we care about, we protect. That's how simple it is. So back to your scaling question, if we can connect faster at multiple scale, obviously education is the most powerful way to change the future for the better, because it is so deep. If we do that well, the future is saved. And then we got politics, which is a hard game and very, we don't want to be there right now. And then there's finance. So of the three, education is the most powerful. It just takes longer. But if we can create it in these learning moments like this, people care, then they protect. We're going to solve it.
There are a lot of, you've published a lot of fascinating stats about the ocean that I'm just going to rattle off a few here, because it's interesting that sort of that breakdown between how important the ocean is versus how little people think about it and care about it, right? As you've said, as we all know, it's a natural resource that covers, more than 70% of the Earth. 80% of the planet's biodiversity is found in the oceans. Only 6% of it has been mapped and explored, fully. Produces 50% of the oxygen on Earth, captures 90% of the excess heat from the atmosphere, all these important aspects of it. So with all of that, how is it that the ocean is still so little understood and thought about?
That is a big and great question. It's puzzled me a lot, because I obviously think it's the out of sight, out of mind problem. So like our physical experience of the ocean is limited to what we can see. If we're on the shores, if we're on the boat, maybe we're in the plane or a mountain, but like the regular human has like a few, maybe 10 to 20 feet depth of understanding, and most of us have no understanding of what's deep down there. If we did, we would be more amazed. Like there's more life, there's more rainforest, there's more of everything we've seen on the planet, like on land down there, that we would be blown away. So it's literally that, like purely physical thing. And the other thing is, I just don't think it's as an kind of like a business area. It's not understood, because is it like a market? No, it's not a market. Is it a sector? No, it's not a sector. It touches all sectors. So it's kind of like, how do we then connect our lives and our businesses and our interests and the planetary situation to the element? And that's what we've been trying to work on, also by going really deep in the science to understand how does the ocean actually work. And the other is to go look at where does the money actually flow. And, right. And the brutal part of that is we found that less than 1% of philanthropic dollars go to the ocean, which is shocking given the numbers you just said, and less than 0.01% of venture capital is invested in the ocean. So it's the most undervalued, underpriced asset on the planet that we haven't really figured out how to nurture yet, which is, I guess, what I'm on a mission to try to solve for.
Right. Yeah, it is a fascinating disconnect, right? And that, I mean, obviously you're talking to people trying to convince them to invest more in the ocean, to think more about it. But I guess, we here in the United States, obviously, we're in a climate right now where scientific research in general is not being funded, and I know you've been talking to a lot of investors in the U.S. too about that, and so we're trying to sort of help some of those efforts, especially in the university research space, because it's creating a scientific crisis, even broader than the ocean, but. And we find in terms of some of the clients that we talk to, there's that line between, you want to talk about positive impact, want to make sure there's always a positive impact, but you also want to not sugarcoat the threats of catastrophe. So it seems that with the ocean, that's more important than in almost any other field. That sort of dichotomy between talking about positive impact and threats of catastrophe. I mean, do you feel that one of those directions works better when talking to potential investors, or do you always need to talk about both simultaneously?
I can tell you, talking about the catastrophe doesn't work. You only rattle the people already convinced, and they are already activists and putting everything they got in their life into solving this. So if we think about, we need to shift money and like resources as energy to solutions, we have to do other things. I think for the most sophisticated investor or people with assets that can kind of reprioritize, it is connecting it to the scientific kind of effects and also making it specific. So to your former question, I think we see some amazing so-called bioregional work. So because if you think about the ocean as a global system, we can, and we do. It's very, very big. And it's so many factors and levers and interconnections and keystones and to think about. And in some, like if you think about transport industries, shipping, you have to think about it because it uses the ocean as a highway to move goods across, right? So like that's a perspective. But from a purely how do we measure what matters and what works, it has to be brought down to place. There's amazing work now being done in the Gulf of California with a group called Co-Capital and Co-Plataforma, and another group called Ilumbra, taking science that is done by multiple universities and bringing that down to measurable impact and work on the ground and on the shoreline and in the ocean. And to land my point, I think that's where we can see this is where kind of money trickles down to activity, creates value and positive impact that we can measure, and we can aggregate that up to a global level again. That's kind of the way we can make it work. For others, I think it's more being part of like a meaningful shift and understanding that if you have kind of like there's end game scenarios, you're probably familiar with the term. If you stack all the science that we already know for true, if you stack that up and we continue as we do, we get going at very dark end game scenarios. But there's multiple levers that we can tweak, and the ocean has many of them. And so we can start interacting with those most important systems that we need to shift for the better, for the bigger thing to shift for the better. And that's very like we can identify that, and then we can very precisely channel capital to the kinds of projects needed, even with a good risk return profile. So some of them are quite profitable while still doing good. Others won't be very profitable. They won't lose money, they will return money, but they will actually just do a lot of good and be very precise exactly what is the effect of that dollar. And we can even measure that now because we have data science and technology that tells the net impact performance of a dollar invested.
Do you find it more difficult to motivate interest in those that aren't delivering? I'm just thinking about how many investors seem so focused on the profit as being the be-all, end-all of any investment.
Yeah. So, and stop me if I become finance nerdy here, but
no, we're not finance nerds. We want you to tell us.
I need everything I can get. Go.
The bulk of it is all institutional capital. So institutions managing capital, their mandates are mostly not set up for the kind of future positive investment that I'm talking about. They're literally not. It's not in their mandate, and it's not in their performance incentives. They won't do it.
Right.
Those who can do it are families and high net worth family capital, because basically both the wealth comes from long views and multi-generational work, and they can afford, if they want to be thinking beyond the transition wall of generation, or even like a return wall of I need to have my money back in this X% return in 7 years. So if they choose to, they can say I want to allocate a certain amount of my portfolio to a longer term triple performance or value creation that also has social and ecological effects. And those are the ones we focus on. And there's $90+ trillion in that segment. And a lot of it is actually changing generational hands in the next 10 to 15 years. And a lot of those coming in are women. So there's a lot of more people coming in that care more about that future than maybe the mother and father did, and would like to change their strategy and be a part of these things. And we're trying to make that like an opportunity for them to choose the path they like to be on. And then we can help facilitate multiple ways for that money to be put to the best work. So I think that is the unlock. But we're still talking about, a smaller percentage of the total capital out there. And it's, but we'd rather focus on those who say and seem to want to be part of the solution and the future than the laggards. I'm still talking to, investment bankers and people that are like, isn't this climate thing going to end soon? Because you talked about it now for 15 years and look at the market, it's still doing great. So What's up? And then we're like, okay, meeting over, bye-bye. Don't have anything to talk to you about.
Right.
So
Well, I know with the university audiences that we typically talk to when we're talking to potential donors that are, alumni, faculty, staff, parents, students, it's so important to give them a message of impact. So people want that instant gratification to know I'm donating $100. Where's it going to go? And to say, oh, it's going to support scholarships to help, needy kids be able to go, or it's to help, eliminate student loans or freeze tuition or what, or support the specific department. Those are easy things to demonstrate impact for. When you're talking about the ocean, you're talking about 70% of the world's surface, the vast majority of species on Earth. Like, that's a huge canvas. Like, how I imagine it's a lot tougher to show. I mean, as you said, bringing it down to place allows you to tell a story of impact, right? Like, rather than trying to tell, the broad scale story of the ocean.
Yeah. And what we to try to solve that, because it's not easy. Obviously, we've applied a science approach developed by Stockholm Resilience Center, which I don't know if they're the people behind the planetary boundary system, for example, that is a part of measuring how is the total human activity on the planet impacting the planetary boundaries, which we now overstepped 7 out of 9 of the planetary boundaries. Johan Rockström and these, world leaders in that field. And we also then work with MIT and University of British Columbia and other institutions to kind of overlap the science and the systemic approach to this. And then our approach has been to break this down to ocean positive investment thesis. So, for example, what are the solutions for ocean regeneration? Well, that's regenerative aquaculture. That's sustainable fisheries. It's, circular resources. It's, empowering healthy ocean ecosystems, blue carbon, coral and mangrove restoration. And the same with human resilience, to your point earlier, Kevin, like 1 billion people live on the shorelines. Our houses are there. When those storms hit, and they will, our livelihoods are going to be taken away. And it's not only in the global south, it is in Miami. It's so it's so much value and life value that is a threat. So how can we invest in solutions for human resilience connected to the ocean, like freshwater, marine transportation, coastal resilience, marine energies, things like that? So that's how it becomes practical from a thesis point of view. And then we have to find the best projects and companies on the planet that can actually build those solutions and scale them. And we can measure their impact like bottom up based on what exactly they do. So that's my long but specific answer to your question.
Oh, I love that. And I'd love to pivot, if you don't mind, because you, in a previous conversation, you talked about how the fabric that used to bring us together society-wide is being torn apart, but that the educational system can be the repair mechanism to fix that. And I really love that idea. I'd love if you could explain that a bit to us, that idea of education being a repair mechanism.
Yes. Yeah. We all feel where we are right now, I think, in different ways. And we are all concerned about what's happening. And as I alluded to earlier, I think, like, if you want to simplify, there's 3 ways to make the world better. It is politics, it's finance, because you move money, and that's energy, and that, and the last is education. So one thing is kind of the formative part of that as kind of a mission, and probably one of the most important things we can use resources on and for. But then I'm also thinking about education as the arena where we're gathering. And I think, and I'm very humbled that I don't fully know the American system, but I believe, for example, the colleges and universities has been the place where people of diverse backgrounds are coming together, and it kind of weaves us together as a part of the society we're in, and builds not only learning and careers and personal journeys, but it creates like that structure. So that's why I think it's so important to defend and build and invest in that. Maybe the most important assets we can invest in. So like all these scales, that matters all down to bringing us together. And we see it in Europe, we see it in Norway. It's the same dynamic, just not as brutal as what we're observing in the US. And that's why one of our counter tactics must be, how do we empower that circle of diverse people coming together to learn?
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that I really love that you guys have been doing is the idea of making a lot of your work open source, right? In the US, we unfortunately have a tendency to, everybody wants to make something proprietary, or I want to own this, I want to be able to make money off of this. And you guys have had a sort of an opposite approach of trying to make these things open source, make them, travel to different universities and different institutions who can spread this learning across the globe, as we talked about before, to take that small experiential impact and try to exponentially make it larger. But I imagine from an investment standpoint, you must run into some roadblocks on that, where investors don't necessarily want everything to be open source.
Sure, but again, those are the slow and maybe not the smartest investors. I think even like open source looks like just giving away, and I do think from a principle point of view, those of us who have learned or have built something that could be useful to a lot of other people should be giving and sharing. So it's more like a principle view.
It's more like collaboration than giving away.
Yeah.
It's inviting others to help. Yeah.
But from a purely also a large part of the Tesla success with Elon Musk was open sourcing, because he could never build Tesla if there wasn't an industry trying to adapt to the shift he was driving.
Right.
If you see how the Chinese are, facing the Americans in the AI game, is actually through open source AI development. So I think it's underestimated also that you can build movements and much bigger energy flow, but also very, very strong positions by open source methodologies. So I think you can win for everyone, and even win in the business if that's what you want to do by being more open. So that's what we do.
So just to sort of tie this back to major donors, and to a group that we're often trying to help reach when it comes to universities, obviously, unlocking major donors is important to any philanthropic cause, any you can say any important humanity related cause. Is how do you convince these major donors to put their money behind these efforts, and are there challenges that you sort of see recurring over and over again in terms of motivating them to give? Give us your secrets.
Yeah, so I can only speak to my experience and the field I'm in, but what I've learned is there are incredible amounts of resources, money, just left not put to work. I think someone said there's $200 billion stuck in donor advised funds in the US right now that are not put to work, and they could go to any good thing, because that's what they're put there to do, and there's some tax incentives to do so, but they're not put to work. So I think it's kind of like, how do we unlock money where they sit, which is partly technical, like just make it efficient and unlock it, and also what is the motivation? One thing I've been more aware of, and we're talking to maybe the highest level of resourceful people, is that one thing is the pure capital, but the other is kind of the symbolic capital in a way, who's doing it and who's doing it together. And I think one of the really strong things we see now, I've been working a lot with an amazing American family office of the principal Lucas Walton, which is an heir of the Walmart, or one of the heirs of the Walmart, family. And he's been very clear on his mission within ocean, within food and agriculture and energy, to shift markets and minds for good. And so he's one of those who are really putting resources into the future we need to build. And what I see out there's a lot of other people that would like to do the same. So it's a coordination solution. How can we help them do more of the same, and maybe even together, because the value of doing something amongst other peers that you really respect has also a value. So trying to fix coordination, motivation, the collective, and ultimately also kind of understanding what that can do in time. And if we can do this well, and it's our job, I guess, as facilitators of capital, to show how much good this could lead to, I think the resource side is not the problem. It will actually then start flowing to where it needs to be. And I see it happening in a very motivating way right now.
How important is the voice of Lucas Walton and those kind of donors in motivating other donors to do what they're, because it feels that the donor story is often sort of left out because you think, oh, I don't want to hear about another rich guy just trying to figure out what to invite. But it sounds like Lucas Walton has an objective that aligns with your own in some ways.
Yes, and this is, this is my European view at this. But what I can observe is when a very resourceful individual like him that has a personal experience with his mom and dad sailing, Baja and saving whales and being a part of the marine life, seeing people losing their jobs because the fisheries are gone. Like, so he's connected. When he does what he about 6-7 years ago, I think he started putting a lot of resources to work in this space. That symbolic capital, in addition to the financial capital, is so important because it's been part of building the entire ocean impact venture, like ocean positive investment system globally. Now, 6 years later, it's getting more mature, and suddenly there's tens, hundreds, thousands of others that would like to be doing the same. So that we have role models like that, and that people, and we find ways to take that learning, help the others to do it faster and better the way they want it. I think that's incredibly powerful and very inspiring to see when that works.
Absolutely. I recognize we've taken a ton of your time, but I did want to give you an opportunity to talk to us about, any upcoming projects because you're always working on projects that I'll hear about 10 years from now. So what little insight into the future can you give us of stuff that you're working on that you're excited about?
Yeah. So the last thing I talked to is actually something we called Project Wave, which is literally, can we unlock this kind of capital? Because there's Australians, Asians, Latin Americans, Africans, Europeans, others that would like to do much more if they knew what we know. So knowing the 1% or 0.0% number, seeing the entire opportunity, having kind of a way for that capital to be orchestrated. We just call it, as a metaphor, a wave. That's happening. And we'll just see how big that wave can become from 2026 and on. So that's something we're doing in partnerships with multiple, it's an ecosystem move. It's not a one party. It has to be a fleet, not a solo sail, literally. The other thing we're trying to do is to develop, based on our learning. We've been, investing in maybe hundreds of companies and a lot of funds. We have a lot of learning how that works and some best practices on how does these best triple performance, meaning social, environmental, financial champions, how does that work? And so we open source that at very business model canvas level. It's called projectalign.org. Very simple, but we're also looking at how AI can enable humans to build more of those solutions faster. So we're looking at how that could be somewhat serving the future as well. So those are the two things I'm really excited about right now as we speak.
Well, I love to hear that positivity because it's easy to get lost, as we talked about before. It's easy to get lost in the catastrophe story without seeing the potential for positive impact. So as you said, it's important to remind people that there is a great potential for a great opportunity in the investment sector for positive impact stories as well.
Yeah, I want to quote Mr. Rogers from years ago that said, "When you see a catastrophe, look for the helpers." Tell little kids to help. That's when they see something happen. Look at, there's always people around helping, and I think that's part of the mentality here. Is that, you know what? Yes, there is catastrophic things happening around us. There are people like yourself, Sindre, and I'm really impressed with. I mean, talk about taking on a topic. You didn't give yourself a small ball of wax to play with there with the ocean. And for you to take all of this effort, time, and focus to work on this, bring this positivity, the storytelling. It is the way this gets from passion to passion, is person to person, is hearing these stories and understanding what you're doing. I wouldn't have had any idea of how to start with. You give me a blank page and okay, save the oceans. We wouldn't get too far. But I'm really I'm really impressed with what you're doing and why you're doing it. but also I think the relentless positivity is part of it, because if you're down telling this story, then people aren't going to engage with it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. And I think hope is the most radical politics we can have right now. And there's someone smarter than me said this, so I'm not going to steal that quote, but I think it rings true to me. I think secondly, I fundamentally believe that humans are kind. So to your helpers, actually, when we get it, we do the right things. Most of us, the majority, will do the right things. I think if you see how talent are moving, there's a huge shift in where really, really smart, educated people are choosing to spend their talent. So I think like the moral imperative, where am I going to like make just another person richer, or am I actually going to use my super strengths or skills to try to be a part of the biggest solve in human history? And I think, that's a huge movement there. And all full circle, for me, education is the unlock and the place. And I just happen to choose the ocean as my educational arena, but the pattern is there.
Marine life everywhere. Thanks you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Sindre. I know you just recently returned home from your travels, and you're about to leave tomorrow for Zanzibar. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Sindre.
Love speaking to you guys.
Yeah, take care.